Canada? At war with its neighbors? Surrounded by 6 nuclear-armed countries? One raids Canadian fishing boats for human smuggling and drugs, while another is hiding billions of tax dollars. Though Canada is a peaceful country, we have our own fair share of border disputes, including some you'd never expect. In doing our neighbor roundup, let's start off with our neighbor to the south and northwest. The country we can never praise as Canadians because that's treason. The United States of America. Turns out, despite being a peaceful border, we still have a couple of issues. A recent flare-up of an old dispute can be found in New Brunswick, where both countries claim the Machias Seal Island. This is also where the Canadian Coast Guard staffs a lighthouse to stake the true north claim to the island, and, more importantly, to the lobster harvesting rights offshore. The issue used to be around who gets to fish, or more importantly harvest said lobsters, and it usually resulted in a bunch of fishermen from both Maine and Canada, each complaining to the only one who will listen: local news crews. More recently, however, the previous Trump administration began an immigration crackdown on people traveling to the island to make sure undocumented immigrants from places like Mexico weren't sneaking into the United States through Maine. Don't think they found anyone. A slightly larger dispute is that over the Northwest Passage and whether or not US vessels can cross without Canada's permission. This has caused diplomatic incidents between Ottawa and Washington going back to the 1960s, but that's much more complicated of a story that will need its own video in the future. Okay, so that was a lot. Besides the US, who else is Canada arguing with, and how often do they raid Canadian fishing vessels? Well, it turns out Canada is kinda, sorta, technically at war with Denmark. Yes, you heard me right. These two peace-loving countries have been kinda, sorta at war for decades thanks to Denmark's autonomous area of Greenland. Way up north, a little further north, you'll find the uninhabited Hans Island, only 19 kilometers off the coast of Ellesmere Island in Nunavut. This unsuspecting island is home to competing claims between the Danish and Canadians. Canada and Denmark have tried to settle the dispute before, but to no avail. The Danish were having none of it. In 1972, the two countries were able to chart the strait between Greenland and, at the time, the Northwest Territories. But since the Hans Island were uninhabited, remote, and smack dab in the middle, the treaty that was ratified a year later didn't solve the issue, since whoever controlled this island could theoretically claim even more waters around the island. Over the next few decades, both countries have held minor military exercises in the area, but always claimed they aren't preparing for war with each other. I mean, can you imagine Denmark and Greenland going to war with Canada? Neither can I. Most recently, in 2018, both countries have established a joint task force to try and deal with the issue, but this has obviously gone nowhere. Since at least 1984, both countries have invaded each other's claims by leaving small quantities of alcohol and signs welcoming the other invading force to their respective country. This is why you'll find the internet littered with articles and videos about how Canada and Denmark are fighting the most polite war ever. All I can say is let's hope we settle this issue before somebody finds oil underneath those whiskey bottles. If Canada and Denmark choose the most straightforward route and split the island in half, Canada will end up with a second land border, making her third closest neighbor her second. Wait, if Denmark isn't our second closest neighbor, then who is second? And are we at war with them too? And no, I can't find any recent cases of the French Navy inspecting Canadian fishing boats for illegal immigrants in the Atlantic. Though that doesn't mean things were always peaceful. Right here on the far east of the country, we find the old remnant of the former colony of New France, which once stretched from Labrador to the Gulf of Mexico. the islands of Saint Pierre and Miquelon, 6 kilometers off the coast of what is now Newfoundland. How this turned into this is thanks to a previous war, the French and Indian War, which may or may not be part of the 7 Years' War depending on who you ask. Fun fact, the 7 Years' War is sometimes called the first true global war because it was fought on 5 continents. In part because of King Louis XV's refusal to concentrate his efforts in one theater, unlike Great Britain who focused overseas and bravely abandoned their continental ally to suffer, France lost pretty much all of their colonial possessions east and north of the Mississippi to the British. This is why some French Canadians call it La Guerre de la Conquête, since it symbolizes the beginning of French oppression by the Anglos, that can only be ended with the independence of Quebec so they can be free to do some oppression of their own. When the war ended and the dust settled, France retained fishing rights in the region and was only able to hold on to these islands so their fishermen could dry their catch. It's worth noting that in the negotiations that ended the wars, France surrendered all of New France for the return of Guadeloupe, an archipelago of slave-powered plantation islands in the Caribbean, as many French viewed these plantations as way more valuable than their northern possessions in the New World. Voltaire famously called New France nothing more than a few acres of snow. So for Canadians looking for a more exotic French experience than Quebec, but who can't be bothered to navigate Charles de Gaulle Airport, now you know where to go. Okay, no more beating around the continent. What about the Big Daddy of the North? We all know who I'm talking about. Russia. Just one Alaska away. How well do we get along with... Oh. What about more recent? Oh. Oof. Okay, so that isn't great. Guess we are lucky to have an ocean between us. Actually, hold on one second. When Canada just came into existence on July 1st, 1867 until October 18th of that same year, Alaska was still part of the Russian Empire. Did that mean Canada used to share a land border with Russia? Sadly, no. The vodka-drinking bear wrestlers were never our land neighbors. Although Canada had just popped into existence, it was still only comprised of the first 4 provinces at the time, and the parts that bordered Russian America, the old Northwestern Territory and the colony of British Columbia, were not transferred by the British to Canada until 1870 and 1871, respectively. In fact, Russia isn't even next on the list of closest neighbors. They're actually all the way down at number 6. To find number 4 on the list, assuming you believe in the round Earth, just go north. A little further north, and you will find the Arctic archipelago of Svalbard, a quick hop across Greenland. You may well know this place from that video Johnny Harris did for that company that was foolish enough to part ways with him. And also Yes Theory just went there, so I won't really elaborate much on this since you can just go watch their videos instead. But basically, the 1925 Svalbard Treaty allows any signatory to exploit the island in a civilian manner only. That's why there can be a large Russian presence in a NATO country. Canada, despite being a signatory, has yet to take advantage of this economic opportunity, presumably because we have our own Arctic to mercilessly exploit. Okay, one last one now. We covered the war, the raids, the past wars, and maybe, hopefully not, a future war. But what about the tax haven? And oh look, they fit right in at number 5 in the list of closest neighbors to Canada. Almost like this video began as a top 10 list or something. If you know the answer, then you're probably either a tax auditor, or you work at KPMG and your clients haven't paid taxes since 1987. See, that money is hiding offshore, specifically 650 miles off the shore of the Carolinas. Still don't know what I'm talking about? I'm referring to the tiny, self-governing British Overseas Territory of Bermuda. It's not technically the UK, but a territory of the UK, meaning they are self-governing with the exception of military and foreign affairs for which they are dependent on their former colonizers. This is different from Canada, who is independent in foreign affairs and is only dependent in military assistance on the United States. I kid. Of course I kid. As an aside, they renamed what Bermuda was from a British dependent territory to an overseas territory some 20 years ago to try and stop British folk from viewing the territories as inferior and in constant need of assistance, since some like Bermuda are definitely not in need of handouts because of their highly lucrative and filthy offshore banking industry that leeches tax dollars from everywhere else, including Canada, by helping the wealthy corporations pay zero taxes to the detriment of everybody else. Thanks, Bermuda. Well, there you go, Canada's closest neighbors. Anybody you want me to cover next? Feel free to like and subscribe for more of these videos, and check out some of these other ones. I'll see you next time.